Hi, Vlad, are you?
Yes, I don't think they can see us just yet. I haven't started the session, but I will start it now. I think it's okay. They can start joining in. All right?
All right, I can hear you. Can you hear me properly?
Yep.
All right, that's good. Hi, Oksana.
Hello, Oksana. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear. I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so it's all good. It's a new. So we are in stage already, yes, and computer, and
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
recording in
I
progress.
just
Yeah.
started. Yes, I already started the recording. I changed the settings, Willie, so you will be able to share your screen straight away. While we, it's still on the 1 minute before the actual start time, we're gonna wait for people to join in before William will start presenting. In the meantime, Oksana, if you wanna, greet people as we always do and talk a little bit about the main purpose of this webinar, would be great.
Yes, for sure. Excellent. Thank you so much, Vlad. Really, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting me with this. For those, and I'm super excited today because many of you who are attending know that very frequently we actually invite external speakers. And today it's us, it's me and William, and we actually got a really big audience. So thank you so much for your support. It looks like the topic has struck the chord with you and our network. So we will do our best to actually make it valuable and interesting for you. So, and I know many of you already returning for our webinar, so I don't want to be repeating myself, but very quickly, today webinar is part of our Funding Accelerator program and series of webinars that we've been hosting over the last 2 years. We started this program with a Green Energy Summit, which was very successful, and then we launched the Funding Accelerator. And as a result, we actually learned a lot, and we expanded dramatically our investor network. We improved our understanding of how to be effective and how to be much more successful working with professional, international, and leading investors. So with this kind of accumulated knowledge and insight, we kind of developed this system and program that we would like to share with you today. We've been kind of working with all QPQ team, as well as William, who will be presenting here today. So that's what we would like to share. Basically, the focus of the discussion today is share with you the strategies of how to advance development, accelerate financing, and secure world-class partners and funders for your program. So as I said, Willie is one of our senior advisors. He's been part of this program and very much kind of hand in hand with the rest of the QPQ team, advisory team, and myself, shaping and creating what we want to also basically working and being part of this program as well, of course, but then accumulating knowledge and constantly asking a question, okay, how we can help more developers, how we can help them, how we can help more developers secure funding faster on optimal terms and so on, right? So I will quickly talk about a few things, given that I am head of strategy and investor relations in QPQ International, and I'm qualified to cover this part of the topic. So I will talk about, and then of course, William with his wealth and lifetime experience and advising large infrastructure projects, especially in the green energy space and power. He will talk a little bit more, more about the, more sophisticated details of this. Now I think, William, if you could please perhaps share with our audience first slide, and then I will just start covering. I've got
just before you go, let me just remind a few simple rules on how people can post questions, because not everyone familiar with Zoom. We have actually migrated recently from our usual platform, which was Demio, which was a bit easier to use, but this one, Zoom, is more sophisticated but complicated at the same time. Guys, if you have questions, you can post them. There are two options there. You can post them in chat. It will come to us, to the presenters, or there is an option for Q&A. So they actually for today's webinar, they serve the same purpose. So you can either, you can use either of them. And I will also upload this presentation that Oksana and William prepared. I will upload it in the chat as well, so you'll be able to download it as well. And we're recording this session because we always do for people who, for some reason, haven't been able to attend, or will have to leave. And hopefully you won't have to, but if you do, it will be available as well, and will be sent to you as well. All right. Well, please, Ulrich, go ahead.
Exactly, yes. So, and of course, because there are so many people in different time zones and can't physically attend, we always make sure that people get the handout and also recording. So perhaps then we can start with the first slide. So as I said, yeah, the next slide would be great. Thank you, Willie. So basically, as I said, I will be talking about the mindset and having this privilege of working with so many fantastic developers and investors over the last few years and have accumulated so much insights. I want to talk about the investor mindset and this huge gap that I see in perception, of what investors are seeking and what developers are seeking, and both seem to want the same thing, but I sense how they actually speak in different languages. And there is like this huge miscommunication that's going on, the miscommunication that we actually want to kind of resolve as part of this presentation and the program. But the big contention issue and the topic that I actually want to share, not topic, but the statement that I want to share with you is that common complaint in this industry is this not enough funding. But what we're observing is actually the reverse, is actually not enough good investable projects. So I will quote your data that actually was accumulated by United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And in order for us as a humanity to hit our 2050 net zero goals, we need to be investing about $2.6 trillion annually in green energy and sustainable infrastructure. But when basically a group that did this research, they basically took stock of all the projects that are on the market seeking funding, and then looked at the projects which are investable projects. So while there was a incredible amount of a huge amount of projects floating in the market, and but investable projects amounted only to 1.2 trillion. So this is really huge deficit of projects in relation to, and when we look at their available capital, looking at the availability, world could actually easily front up with the 2.6, and they have the money available to front up with this amount, but simply there's just not enough good investable projects. And and the key word here is investable. And here is this, you can see on the slide, is that it's only 10% of green energy projects secure world-class funders. And this is what, and I want to quickly discuss what really separates and what is different about this 10% of 10% who secure funding, right? So if we can perhaps then flip the slide and look at I just want to make sure that I also don't speak too much and leave the time for William. But basically, this miscommunication that's go on in terms of mismatch of mindset and expectations between developers and investors is that, see, it's important that developers understand, and the 10% who are successful, they actually understand how investors work. Yes, and we actually always act as a bridge to kind of help developers to kind of to bridge this gap in communication. But here I would like to share with you key points that are so important for developers. The experienced developers, they actually understand that fundraising process is a complicated, very involved process that they need to work and prepare themselves and other things. But the first time developers often have this misconception, right? So now what's important to understand is that investors are very risk averse. So because developers sometimes think, okay, I really need to make something really super innovative, put a whole lot of like a really cool technologies in my project. So this will make me different and set me apart from the rest of the projects on the market. This is a mistake because investors don't like projects that are very, utilize experimental technologies, are too complicated. I will talk about it. But so there's the simpler the project is, the better you are suited and you can demonstrate that you can actually implement and this project will work, the better chances you have to secure funding. Because investors really have, we also need to think about and step into the shoes of investors, because sometimes developers have this misconception that investors, they kind of think, okay, well, these guys have billions of dollars. It's nothing for them to invest $50 million in my project. Well, 50 million is still 50 million, is still a lot of money. And of course, investors also have duties and responsibilities in front of investors that invested into their fund, right? So it's a huge responsibility, and they're responsible for every penny that they invest. So of course, they want to make sure that if they invest, the project will be successful, right? So now we also have only one chance with investors, because investors want to see that you understand what you are doing, right? They trust their money and put their trust in you and other things. So if you approach investors, or we are together approach investors, it's very, very important to be prepared, as they say, to have a ducks in the row. So all the ducks in the row, all the documentation in complete, readiness, and project also need to be de-risked and a lot of other things. But you cannot go, and that's where we always say, let's not be in a rush. Let's make sure that we are fully prepared. So when we are in front of investors, when we present your project, then we don't we don't make mistakes and lose face or appear incompetent or appear as we didn't think things through. And then, of course, because the second that the investors get that impression, then we lost our chance. So you only have one chance with investor. Okay. So also, we always get this very frequently, developers come in and they kind of go like, well, you have so many investors, like, why can't you just, this is what we want to create. I'm sure you can, I'm sure you can get your investors to, our project, of course, everyone thinks that their project is amazing, and then, of course, we always do all our best to, we see some incredible projects, and I'm incredibly at awe and inspired by level of commitment of our community and developers and other things, right? But unfortunately, we need to also work within their given reality, and we cannot kind of bend the reality to suit us. Yes, and the same thing is that the investors also have their constraints, so they can only work within approved mandates. And basically, is the next following line is they say you basically need to understand how investors work. You need to understand what their rules, and you need to play by those rules. And by virtue of our interaction with investors, we understand their rules, and we want to communicate that with you, right? And we often do communicate it, but during during the engagement with our developers, we always communicated, but there is always this kind of mistrust as if, we could have done something and we don't. But, the key thing to realize is that investors, they have a set of parameters and a set of rules, and they have to follow them, and we cannot bend them. And one of those rules is that project needs to, key and fundamental rule is that project needs to have a proper set of project documentation. The project needs to be well thought through. I will cover that in my following slide, but and the project needs to withstand very strict due diligence and scrutiny. And often our developers come and they start basically saying, explaining on things on, like in words. We say, okay, that's great. Where is the data room? Where is the documentation? Okay, we need a feedstock agreement that you say, do you have a feedstock? Yes, I have. Okay, where is the feedstock agreement? Oh, no, we just have verbal agreement. Well, that's not good enough. The thing is that in words, unfortunately, investors only look and rely on verifiable binding contracts and verifiable information. Well, words and passion, it's all great. But when it comes to investors and really be serious about securing funding, it's all about wealth, it's all about de-risking, it's all about good, very thorough preparation, and it's all about, having thought, being prepared, so yes, so investors have strictly qualifying criteria, and all of it has to be met. Honestly, the thing is that sometimes, and that qualifying criteria is very strict, so, and we all constantly with our developers work on making sure that we satisfy the qualifying criteria. But sometimes I'll tell you that even 1 out of 100 important requirements will not be met, investors most likely will back out. So it's so important to actually, it's so important to be intuitive in relation to investors' need if you want to really secure and work on providing whatever is required, because developers often just say, okay, well, if this guy will not accept it, then someone else will. But the thing is that no, it's basically overarching principle, because you see, often the project finance, I mean, though experienced developers, they actually understand it. But those who do it for first time, they actually don't. They look at it, they think it's like venture capital, where you can come to maybe a small family fund and with a lot of passion convince them to invest in your venture with a lot of just having a presentation and a lot of passion. Project finance doesn't work like that. There is a set of parameters, very strict set of parameters that needs to be qualified, right? So in terms of project documentation, as well as interrelationship with investors. Yeah, maybe next slide, William, please. William, yeah, can I get the next slide? So, and this is my last slide, and I think that I already kind of mentioned, the things that I will be talking about, but and I already mentioned certain things in my previous slide. So, what investors like? So, investors they like developers with proven track record and experienced teams. This is very, very important. So this is the first thing that investors ask us: how experienced is the team? What have they done? Have they done similar projects in the past? Because what they need to understand is that, okay, well, you've done it in the past and you know how to do it, right? So if you haven't, often we get first-time developers, but very experienced people who worked in corporate world. They worked for very large projects and other things. But unfortunately, what happened is that the investors often look that has this specific SPV or company have done it. Not outside of the not outside experience. Of course, most developers have experience in different ventures, in different undertakings, previous experience. But often it's very important to get some track record in their under the current company. If that's not there, if you don't have it, then of course it's important to important to build a very strong, maybe board of advisors, and bring some experienced partners as well, maybe experienced EPCs, you know, depending on what you want to do, right? So proven track record and experience of the team is very, very important. Now, what investors like? They like developers with prudent and pragmatic business thinking. So it's very, very important. So developers like, you know, high on emotions, that come, for example, for meetings, they're not very well prepared, but they think that with, you know, a lot of excitement and other things, they will kind of charm and, I don't know, get the attention of the investor. Yes, of course, it's important to be passionate about what you do, for sure. But you need developers that show down-to-earth attitude, not drama, no, you know, down-to-earth pragmatic attitude to making business, because often, you know, the negotiation process is also very emotional, intense process, right? You know, so developers who cannot manage their emotions often derail negotiation process. So staying cool, keeping your head straight, you know, cool, and understanding that investors also have their set of goals that they need to achieve, and sometimes maybe offers may come across to you as like, oh my gosh, this is unacceptable and other things, but you always need to step into shoes of investor and think from their perspective, you know, because really all investors want really is they want to you know, if they look and they like the project, they want to close this project, because all of them have budgets, they all need to deploy the capital, but they need to deploy that capital prudently, and they need to make sure that they allocate the capital and funds to the best possible project, right? You know, so and I can see that developers with prudent pragmatic business thinking succeed in you know, much more successful in secure funding than not, you know, than those who are you know, drama queens, too emotionals, getting, you know, so and so on. So so it's developers who have who understand market and have realistic market expectations. So this is very, very important. Why? Because often, of course, like anything, you know, like when we build our business, it's our baby, you know, like QPQ International is my baby, you know, I put my heart and soul into it. And if anyone asks me to assign value to it, I think it's priceless, you know, because you know, and so on, right? And developers as well, you know, like you put so much effort into it, and all of you think that, but there is such thing as the market reality. And it's important that you understand that market reality, because you understand how, you know, what is the market, what is the price, what is the average price for megawatt for projects, comparable projects, you know, and so on, right? And you also need to understand what are you realistically look and understand what are the risks, what are the project's risks that your project represent, what are their potential pitfalls and other things. So looking at your project objectively and realistically will actually, first of all, help you to prepare and to de-risk your project, and also then keep your head cool during negotiation. Yeah. So as I already said, proven technology, simple business model, and then of course, as a rule of thumb, very simple. You must have, you know, it's important to, of course, you know, in some countries, you know, like, but you need to have a land secured, you need to have a feedstock, you need to have an offtake or PPA. And for some countries, of course, absolutely must is a grid connection. I mean, this is absolutely entry level. Absolutely, the first thing that every investor asks. If you don't have secured, you don't have a project. You know, if you don't have feedstock for waste energy, you don't have a project. You know, and offtake, all those things. You know, so and that's it. And then, of course, properly populated data room and all supporting project documentation. It comes without saying. And I will let Willie talk and take over from here and go much deeper into this. I hope I'm not over time. I can talk like a radio, like let's.
Well, thanks, Oksana.
And
can everybody hear me? And thank you as well for the introduction of myself. So that's great stuff. I think, yeah, so my name is William Zealy. I'm based in South Africa. And much like the picture on the screen at the moment, preparing for a webinar in South Africa is a little bit like a developer's plan versus the unfortunate reality. Developer's plan is quite straightforward and simple, and you can see the end in goal. And preparing for this webinar in South Africa, for those that don't know, we have up to 10 to 12 hours of load shedding daily at the moment, where we have no power from our utility. And we have to make a plan with solar or batteries and inverter. And more so, quite a challenge, as many of our fiber networks and communication towers run on the same type of facilities and cause plenty interruptions. So I'm sitting downstairs, not in my normal office, because the reception is a backup Wi-Fi here downstairs, and it's a road full of pitfalls in preparing for a webinar. So much like your developer's plan, we understand that there are many, many good projects. We understand that the developer, when developing his project, in fact, sees a relatively clear goal in reaching financial close so that construction can start and revenue can flow. Unfortunately, the reality is exactly what we see below. In South Africa, for example, at the moment, we have 10 to 12 hours power issues. The main off-taker that signs PPAs is the utility power, and hence they too have their constraints. And as a result of that, base load is needed to supplement renewables. And therefore, closing a project in South Africa that was possibly a very simple 1 or 2 year plan sometimes extends to 5 and 6 years. We have Ghana, for example, which is a great opportunity for various biomass and solar and other projects. But at the moment, they're struggling to pay this sovereign debt. So closing the project becomes a challenge because of the liquidity of the country. We have the war in Ukraine, we have Sudan, we have environmental agencies that at one stage in the COP26 basically mentioned that they definitely want to stop deforestation. And of course, this has an impact on waste to energy projects using feedstock from wood source or biomass. So projects don't always close easy. And as Oksana rightly mentioned earlier, investors really do look for de-risking a project as much as possible. And hence we've seen within QPQ, of course, and my experience within QPQ and also with other curators, is that there are a lot of projects for the investors to choose from, and we have to catch their eye very early. We have to get that foot in the door and try and not get them to say no right from the beginning, because there's quite a lot of pushback that happens. Once they've said no once, to open that door a second time for the same project becomes a little bit of a challenge for us. In mentioning from, what do really the feedback from investors, and Oksana has mentioned most of this, so I'm not going to belabor this point at all, and I'm only going to highlight 2 or 3 aspects of this. And why do I want to highlight it again is because as QPQ and as the team from QPQ, we really want to work with the developer in making his project sexy so that the investor opens the door and wants to be involved from an early stage. Very importantly is the credibility of the developer and the developer's team, their engineers and their advisors. And we will discuss that aspect a little bit later on how we look at that. Important agreement gaps, Oksana has mentioned. I'm going to mention the thing called reinventing the wheel. Sometimes it's nice to make your project unique, but sometimes most of the investors want to see a basic approach to a project where it is de-risked, and hence the testing of the financial models, looking at the scenario planning and stress testing your financial models, but also a very comprehensive risk matrix, stress testing what happens if, for example, what's happened in Ghana or what's happened in environmental floods, etc. So it's quite important what the fallback opportunity is to fix that problem. A big problem we've come across has been closing capital. Many investors, and not all, but many investors would like to see that the developer himself is prepared to pay for the final closing capital, which includes the compilation of the final agreements, the legal process, the final commercial side and start of the project. And that is the commitment sometimes investors wish to see from the developer to make the project close, particularly when it comes to slightly more challenging territories. Obviously, what do we want from a developer perspective? You want to really get the project closed as quickly as possible, extend the tenors on your project. You'd like to achieve or exceed your return on your investment. And most importantly, most developers want to either hold a strong shareholder position or at least have an exit clause to their benefit of the shareholders and the stakeholders for the project. Investors, of course, are looking and telling us that they really want a de-risk project. They want to know what are the mitigants should there be a loss in revenue. And very important, and then because this gets linked to your EPC and your O&M, what is the security package if things go wrong? What are the guarantees and the warranties and the structure, the loss of revenue that potentially could happen during the operations and maintenance period of the project? Definitely, they want to meet the minimum standards, financial ratios, technical ratios of performance, environmental ratios, and all of those aspects. And there needs to be a balance between the developer and the investor to allow them to both come out in a win-win scenario. Where it's not unbalanced, we see conflict, and definitely we see projects stall right near the end after months of discussions between the investors and the developers. And we want to try and omit that and catch that quite early. So what do we want to try and achieve? We know that on the left-hand side of this presentation, there's a big financial gap when you start your project. And most projects take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to develop properly. And it has an aspect of all the items listed on the left-hand side. And these takes money. It takes money from the developer. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of equity capital put into and sweat equity put into this particular project. And it's important that this is well documented in a proper data room with the proper processes that catches the investor's eye. On the right-hand side, when we start presenting this information to our chosen investors, they start looking for items such as the contract finalization, the investment and credit approvals. Where are the concessions agreement for the land or possibly the right of way or the grid connection? Where's the security, as I mentioned before, and the guarantees, particularly about the structure, the shareholders, and the initial shareholders and the final shareholders of the SPV. And obviously, whether or not, what is the cash flow to close the project, the drawdown of funds to get to actual close. If this feedback, hopefully we facilitate and we're part of your project facilitating this, is given from the investor to you, and the information given back to the investor is slow or incomplete or incorrect, the financial gap closes and pushes us back months and sometimes even terminates the project. And we need to figure out, or we're hoping to figure out, how do we help you and ourselves and the investor to circumvent this and make this a little bit simpler. Financial close, as you know, and I'm not going to teach you what you know, the project only really becomes real and financial close is when the money is there to be drawn. Cash is king. And the bankability of the project moves from theoretical with terms and conditions to actual drawdown of the funds, and construction can begin. What is critical in this process is that obviously for this life cycle to be realized, the sponsors will justify the effort he's put in from a developer point of view. EPCs are key. Without them and without a proper commercial contract, without a proper warranty and guarantees from the EPCs and the O&M, construction will not start. It becomes a major challenge. And many developers feel that they can do their own EPC. Not all investors would accept this, particularly if technology is slightly challenging or not proven. And the key issue becomes critical for advisors to get paid on financial close. It's an important factor. And really, then you have the stakeholders. You have the local community, the governments, the in-country people, the passive investors that really want to see projects like this happen. And that's where the joy comes into actually achieving what you want to achieve. So from QPQ perspective and my feedback, and how do we going to try and be the bridge between the investors, what the feedback we've received from investors, but also the projects we get from yourselves. We get plenty of good projects. In fact, we've got a pipeline of great projects, and we're hoping that from this webinar as well, you have a project that you feel that we can assist with or be part of, and you can email Vlad on the email address that you'll see, and we can take these projects and work with this through you in a process that we hopefully have developed and will benefit open the eyes of the investor to see something of real value, that we can get the project in quicker than normal. We have, as I said, we have a strong pipeline of global projects from all around the world. We have seen, though, that many of these projects lack structure or key information. Inherently, the project is excellent, but perhaps there's some aspect of the project missing, and it's not quite ready to put forward to the investor. Preparation sometimes is lacking, and sometimes this is as a result of the developer having used up their funds. They've put a lot of money into this project. They need some top-up capital, and we need to understand what this is. We need to understand the budget, and we need to tell the investor the real facts on what is needed about the project. The project's not ready to build unless we really understand where we stand. And sometimes we need to tone down the unrealistics of closure from the developers. You know, this quick, fast close, what to expect. And as I showed you in one of my first slides, you know, sometimes the road is paved with hiccups and hurdles we don't even see. And we need to be prepared for those. We need to change the way we are presenting this to the investor to help this and move it forward. From my experience in QPQ, but also prior to QPQ, many of projects are declined that we shared with investors because the information's not been there, or perhaps there's been errors in the financial models, or the assumptions in the models, or in the environmental, or in the calculations from a technology point of view are wrong, or incorrect, or assumed. Permits, many times because projects take a long time, permits expire, rights to the ground or the lease expires, PPAs expire, and these need to be current and pending or have a life extension to them to allow it. So we've spoken about this, and we all know that, and Oksana has mentioned what the investors are really looking for. So what can we do about it? And this is really what I wanted to talk about and quite passionate about, and so is the rest of the team within QPQ. We really want to, with the developer, with you, help improve on the success ratio of the projects that we are dealing with and handling and working with. And we believe this can be done. And perhaps this is by a little bit more early work, preparation work, before we engage the investors. We have over 400 on our books investors at the moment within QPQ. Many of them are very, very active. Some of them are less active. Some of them respond to only the projects that really attract their eyes. We have equity investors, we have debt investors, we have investors from all over the globe, we have EPCs, we have pension fund investors, we have venture capital. So we have the full spectrum of investors that are looking at the projects that we can present them from all over the world. Each of these investors obviously have a sector that they focus on. They have a technology that they prefer, or they may only work in certain countries. Their ticket size may be limited or may be large. And we need to make sure that we package these projects, your projects, properly to attract and to focus on, and we target the correct investors, not just the wrong information to the wrong place, because we haven't really worked with you in making sure that this is right. So we've developed some unique tools that we think, and these are tools that assist with the project assessment process when we assess the project that you give to us for the first time. And we hope that this creates some form of integrity of content that will allow the investors to get confident that the projects that we send to them are in fact being assessed with the developer, and in fact the information is there. We really need to, the main focus is to attract the interest of investors at a very, very early stage. And as mentioned before, if we don't get in the door the first time, even if we make the improvements, getting in the same investor the second time is quite tough. So how do we evaluate the project that you give us? Number one, and taking into account what the developer has shared with us, or not the developer, sorry, the investors have shared with us over the past period, and Oksana has mentioned that, and we've listened to them, we focus on a very, very simple checklists revolving the process we like to follow. Number one, we talk to the developer. We need to understand you, and we need to build a relationship with you. And from that relationship, we have a very simple assessment sheet where we look at your profile, we look at the detail you provided, and we look at the project, what you're offering. For example, your shareholding, what you're prepared to offer the potential investors from a shareholding perspective, your closing capital, etc. And from that, we get a very simple assessment to say, this is a credible developer, they know what they're doing, they're passionate about what they do, they are going to present well in front of an investor. And we can then move on to really look at your project. We do a high-level assessment of your project, and this happens before any non-disclosure agreements between QPQ and yourself are signed, and before you as a developer decide to engage us to work with you to take the project forward. And on this, we really look at the shareholders and the stakeholders. We have a brief look at the technology. We look at the country that your project is going to be based in. We look at the project finances and information and the business model. And from that, we get a very simple, from these questions, we get a very simple percentage of where your project sits on a scale from a investor friendliness or interest point of view. Granted that the questions are weighted to sort of reflect a weighting of the different technologies and how we get to a total score. But at the end of the day, we're trying to compare standards with standards from an investor interest point of view, and what is the information that we have available. Excuse me. If we get past this stage, that's when we really go into the more deep dive into your project. Your project is now credible. There's a lot of interest in your project. We see the merits both from a developer passion point of view, but also from a project point of view and a territory. And we go into a detailed assessment where we have targeted questions that have come up from experience and years of understanding what's needed. And we answer these questions in conjunction with yourself. It may take 1 or 2 or 3 or more, depending on the complexity of your project, calls between our curators and advisors and yourselves and your team. And eventually we complete this questionnaire. Again, it's weighted, not 100% right, but it gives us a standard or a guidance. And we can then assess your project overall. And the main things we assess, items we assess your project on, is sort of in line with the data room that the investors tend to want to see. Not always standard, but we try and cover the bases as best we possibly can. From there, we go and we do a data room audit, and that is with yourself. We go through your data room and just give a comfort to ourselves that when the investor and the NDA engage between yourselves as a developer, the NDA is signed, and we can share the information to the investor, that what's in the data room is not a surprise to anybody, including ourselves and including the investor. And it's a very simple rating of understanding the content of the data room and what is missing. And if there's something missing, we will communicate with the developer what the criteria is. From those scorecards and assessment processes, we sort of have a project dashboard that says, look, this is a good project, or the project is perhaps not quite ready, and we perhaps go into an incubation period where we talk with you and say, look, if we can do a bit of that and a bit of this, we can then get it ready and then move it into an investor-friendly scenario. How do we do this? We've created standard project check sheets where we can go through all the different phases, where there's standard questions, rating against, a very simple rating against the information, where there's a comments column, and we come up with a scorecard and an overall assessment that we would comfortably share with an investor at the time that he starts showing interest in your project. And we will be able to explain where the shortfalls are. For example, if there's a shortfall, as we see in the very second graph there, feedstock, resource, fuel supply agreement at 80%, the investor may say, but why is that not 100%? Well, we say, well, all the agreements are there. They're all in letters of intent. They're all ready to be executed on the final situation where heads of terms is signed between the investor. We have an example, we have an explanation, and credibility starts becoming real. And this is the intention we would like to move forward on between the developers and QPQ. How does all of that help you as the developer? From doing that assessment, QPQ is prepared to provide a complimentary report on qualifying projects. And really, this report would cover the overall assessment of your project, a scorecard, as we see that overall assessment, where we perhaps see project strengths, which we should focus on when we communicate with the investor, where perhaps we see project deficiencies, if any. Most projects have something that we need to look at the risk matrix for and how that's mitigated, and if we have any recommendations. Obviously, this, from a developer's perspective, you may or you may not agree with our assessment, but everything is at least a conversation point to take the discussion a step further. And I think that's what we're trying to do. Very open, constructive discussion to allow us to standardize the way we communicate information with the investors so that we're not left surprised at some of the questions he may have, both for us and yourselves. And really, the whole objective is to get early investor interest. Lastly, the final thing we want to work with is, prior to sending the information, the final information, once the investor has signed an NDA with yourself, we would like to share some form of an investor pack with them. But this is something for you. It's not for us to do. It's guidance to give the investor comfort that the data room is complete, or this is what's missing from the data room. The readiness of the projects as communicated, as we've seen in the previous slides, and also that there's no surprises or delays due to the investor due diligence, because he will do his own due diligence on the financial model, on your engineers, on the technical assessment of the technology, on the land, on the permits, etc. And we need to make sure there's no surprises and the project falls apart right at the altar, right near the end, which has happened to us, unfortunately, and to yourselves, I've no doubt. And really, we want the information to be relied upon. The developer information that we are representing you on should be relied on and give us comfort that we can present that to the selected investors. So I think, in summary, I think that's it. How can we help? We would like to help. We'd like to see some more projects. We'd like to get involved with you. We'd like to have an honest and interactive discussion with you where appropriate. And we definitely want to up the game with regards seeing investors close more projects that we present to them. And that will be very, very good for us, for yourselves, and for future projects. So I think I've said a lot. We've got a bit of time left. A lot of it was repetitive, I think, but really focusing on the next step of providing a really clear project information that the investor knows where to look. I'm going to stop sharing this presentation, I think. There we go. And I've said a lot, yeah.
Anna is joining back in. Okay, she's here. Well, While you kind of filling in, I'll just go through a couple of questions, see if they any of those required to be answered here during the session, and I will let you know in a minute. Okay.
No, just listening to you, I just admire how men can express themselves so concisely and so clearly. You
It's,
had so
it's,
many slides
it's
and you
South
covered
African.
them.
It's South
Yeah,
African,
and you
man.
them so quickly because I looked at the clock. So, oh my gosh, I'm so, I went so over time. So thank you very much for actually being so clear, concise. Very, I enjoyed listening to you. I mean, of course, I've been part of this project, so it's nice to kind of having it so well communicated to people who are attending. We have actually quite a large, group today, and I think that I think there are some questions and answers, right? There are some questions that people are asking. Are there?
Yeah, basically, people are asking, how exactly it works. Basically, do we charge for this project checking assessment? On what basis? So perhaps if we want to start with this, I'll look through others if anything, and then people are also asking if we. Sure, go ahead.
The thing is that the program is really quite pretty much kind of subsidized. We're doing it because our main goal is to get project developers funded. Yes, so that's where we, that's a prize for all of us, right? Get developers funded, and but the thing is that what we're seeing is that unfortunately, as much as we'd like to, there's a lot of projects that are not prepared. I mean, that's we already kind of said, right? So the program itself, the assessment is done. We're doing this assessment for free. Yes, and then the engagement itself is done at actually very great discount. We will we need to look at your project and understand what we're dealing with. But it's absolutely, we are actually charging, we will be charging absolutely nominal price just to qualify commitment. Because, in my experience, when you do something for free, when people get something for free, they don't value it. They don't pay attention, so we will be charging something nominal and symbolic just to make sure that we sift through and focus on those who are committed and serious. And we're only going to be working with the serious committed developers. This is so if you, if you have a good project, do share it with us and let us look into it, and then we will inform you of the following steps. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, Jan is asking more about TRL for deep tech. Would you normally want to engage? And I think there has been a bit of miscommunication because we don't really do venture capital. So kind of new technologies. William mentioned that we have some, venture capital funds in our network, but not enough for us to be able to properly engage with new technologies and ventures. So our focus, as Oksana mentioned earlier, is on project finance. We don't really do venture capital kind of deals. Yeah, that's answering Ian or Jan. Not sure how to pronounce your name correctly. Question. Then another question from Robert. Which geographies do you focus on related to the focus on your investors? Perhaps Oksana, you could cover this up from perspective of our heat map.
Yes. So basically, of course, US and Europe is our kind of, we're very confident, and I mean, we have investors for pretty much any market that is active in green energy transition, and any market that is investable and have acceptable investor risk and currency and other things. But from investor interest perspective, investors definitely, there is a lot of interest in the US, a lot of interest in Europe, all Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, all of it. Then Baltic states, Balkans. So I mean, when in terms of, I can give you countries, for example, now all US in terms of Europe, all Western Europe is, you know, definitely. But then Eastern Europe, we talk about Romania, Poland, Southern Europe, Greece is very hot right now. Southeast Asia, yes, there is a lot of interest in Southeast Asia, not enough good projects, not enough well-formed projects come. South America originate really large good projects, but again, not many of them are, you know, many of them are very early stage, and require a lot of preparation, you know, but there is definitely investor interest in South America as well. Africa selected countries. Africa, you know, we love Africa and we have a lot of projects in Africa. There are a lot of fantastic projects in Africa, but it's difficult to, you know, to fund Africa. Unfortunately, it's there are investors, but again, because all investors understand how difficult it is to do business in Africa and how difficult it's, right? I mean, William knows better than anyone.
If I may just add and interrupt, Africa, I mean, developing countries, lots of investors interested in developing countries, preference tends to be between private off-takers or private PPAs or private sales rather than the public in Africa. So the projects that attract a lot of interest are, in fact, if you're selling to private sector, or PPAs are with private sector, or a company with balance sheets. So we'd like to look at it. So, you know, we'd like to see your projects, particularly if they're good and they're well structured.
Well, exactly. And in developing in emerging markets, it's for investors, what is important, the project needs to be ready to build. Project needs to be really well prepared and, you know, you know, at final stages of development. While in developed economies, we can definitely help with early stage projects, and investors are open and willing to look at earlier stage. In developing in emerging markets, that's definitely not the case. Yes. So I hope I have answered that question.
Yeah, definitely. And there is kind of extension to that question more related to size of projects, which came from Loretta, and well, she's asking if we could give a range of the size of project that our investors are looking for, you know, and what, you know, what equity requirements they normally have. And similar, I'll kind of bundle up those questions together. Another one came from Mark: is there a minimum size of project for solar, biodigestion, storage, or hybrid installations?
Well, so the thing is that so we work in we talk it's infrastructure projects, right? You know, so you have to work with professional investors and institutional investors, and all professional investors work on larger projects. So the larger the project, the better. But normally their kind of starting point, you know, that just to cut, you know, their minimum threshold, the project needs to be at least $20 million capex, you know. So we do take projects sometimes for smaller, like 10 million as an exception, because we really and there are some fantastic smaller projects which we really want to help, and we do find some alternative ways of funding them. But really, you know, if you also thinking about project, if you are a developer, and I'm sure that most of you are developers here, that think about projects that needs to be the project. If your project is, say, 50 million plus capex, you are really well positioned. If you prepare, and if you actually preparing pipeline, that's even better. You know, there is no upper limit. You know, professional investors and QPQ can, you know, together with investors that we're working with, there is no upper limit. You know, large projects, billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, no issues. You know, so there was in the question also, what is the minimum? Yeah, minimum equity requirement, normal equity requirement. Normally, equity requirement is, you know, 70-30, 80-20. Yes, William, please.
Willie, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, and it's very important, you know, we would consider a smaller project of $10 million, but that needs to come with a pipeline of opportunities. And yes, equity and debt, it really depends on the financial model. You know, we need to see the capex, and we need to understand what's the best for the model. Obviously, in developing countries like Africa, sometimes debt is more expensive in country. And if we're using the right technology with export guarantees, we may find that a higher ticket size for the equity may be beneficial. So again, it comes through a discussion and understanding your model.
Very good. Well, I think we have covered majority of questions. If we have missed something, then guys, I have shared several times both my contact details in the chat, which is my email, and I just answered to someone's question with my mobile number as well. If if you prefer to call us directly, please reach out with projects, reach out to us with questions. We'll get them. We'll get everything reviewed and answered to you as soon as possible. And I'll get.
Yeah. Can I ask one question, Vlad? There's quite a lot of questions that have come in. Will we be able to look at these questions and respond to these people?
Oh, yes, I think everything is being saved. So I mean, I tried to bundle up. I'm looking through the questions now, and I bundled up because they come like, for example, how many investors are interested in China? We were in regards to geographies. We do have some, but people won't be able to answer it right now directly.
Okay.
And then similar to what are your kind of views on South America or Brazil? So those questions, I think it would be better if we answer them directly to people.
Okay.
Yep.
So we will get back to all these people that have asked questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, William, first of all, thank you so much for supporting us, and being part of this conversation. And, lastly, but not, not the least, I want to thank the audience. I want to thank you, all of you. I'm sure that most of you are developers, otherwise you wouldn't be here, or people who are in green energy sector. And I'm just incredibly inspired every day talking to people like yourself, developers who are actually choosing not the easiest path. It's not most glamorous path. It's difficult. It's a path completely covered in challenges and setbacks. And but we all we are driven as QPQ. We are driven to make our planet green again. So we are living the planet in a habitable state for our children and next generation. This is something that really inspires me. And I can see, and I feel blessed that I'm, surrounded by people on the mission to make a world a better place. So thank you very much for sharing our journey. Thank you very much for attending the webinar today. We look forward to connecting with you in a month or month and a half for our next webinar, but we will communicate that with you. Thank you very much. We look forward to receiving your questions, your emails, and we look forward to working with you and adding value to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.